Hello, this is me, CatCorelli. I haven't been on here for a while for a lot of reasons, and I've explained those reasons in my last Cat Talk episode, 320. The last YouTube Cat Talk, let's put it this way, because starting September 12th, my Cat Talk show will resume on Rumble, but I'm not abandoning YouTube, and I'm gonna stay here, and I'm gonna be just doing different content like this. This is a first of its kind of episode, a cat vibes episode, something I've never done before, but I thought it might be interesting. So what you see here is me working on a painting of a kitten. I've done this painting in late July, and quite frankly it took me a while to cut it all and to put it all together, because I had like 8 hours of footage and I had to really cut it down to something more manageable, like 40 minutes. I've had a video, a Cat Vibes video, where I was painting another project called A Storm Is Coming, and I wasn't really actually giving any commentary. I just slapped on some music, but quite frankly I kind of got tired of that format a little bit. It's okay sometimes, but sometimes I just feel that I'd like to comment on what exactly am I doing. So this episode is going to be different. I'm going to try to comment on what am I doing here, so that while I don't claim to be teaching painting or anything like that, at least not yet, I think some people might actually find it helpful. Someone who is just starting out with any painting, regardless of the medium, be that oil painting or watercolors or gouache or something like that, or drawing, generally speaking. So way back when I went to art school, when I was like 12 years old, watercolors was my big thing. So how does it relate to what am I doing here? Well, what I'm doing here, I'm like really diluting oil colors with white spirit, with Gamsol. It makes it easier for me to lay out the underlying structure of the future painting, because right now I'm just sketching things out as I see them. Something that is called an underpainting. That's what I'm doing here. And because I want things to be really, really thin, I don't want a lot of paint here yet. I'm thinning out the paint with Gamsol, big time. And you see I'm using mostly angular strokes, rough sketching. I'm not too concerned with details, with fine details right now, and that's, I think, a piece of advice that anybody can take. One should not get carried away with little teeny details in the very beginning. What's more important is to capture the scene. At least that's how I see it. I remember some recommendations from my old teachers and professors way back, when I was to art school. I had this propensity in the past when I was a kid, when I was 12 and went to that art school. It was its own separate thing in terms of curriculum. It wasn't associated in any shape or form with the regular school curriculum. It was its own thing. It was just an art school. So I had this thing, I was getting carried away right away. I was getting into like small little tiny details, and then I was missing out the bigger context of the composition. And I wasn't able to capture the form properly, and the light, the shapes. I used to fail at that. So I heard it over and over again from my teachers, you know, that you should really concern yourself with the big shapes first. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually doing exactly this. I'm starting with big shapes. I'm kind of sketching things out a little bit, and sometimes just giving a little bit of context, like right now with the head. I want to indicate that the top of the head that's where the light really hits it, the fur. And you will see it later. How does that really turn out? Right now, there is plenty of contrast areas. I'm using a photograph for reference, and that's, you know, a photograph that I've taken, and that's one of the kittens, actually, my kittens. As you see, I kind of sketched out the basic shape of the kitten, and now, when it starts to feel a little empty, I feel that it's time to add some context, to see this kitten in a room, because it's in a room, and, you know, in order to really feel, to better understand the shape and the further values of the kitten, I have to provide some context, some visual context, and that's why I'm going right now. I'm focusing so much. You see, I'm spending a lot of time actually starting to add a little bit of color and trying to add a little bit of depth. Well, I'm kind of going back and forth between the kitten. Again, large strokes. It's a very fuzzy little kitten. Initially, the funny part about this kitten is that, you know, the painting is called Good Morning Dahlia. And that is because in the beginning, it was very difficult to determine if it's a she or a he. So initially I thought that it's a she, and I was wrong, and because, you know, once the kitten started to grow up, you know, a little bit, it turned out that it's a he. So I had to rename the kitten from Dahlia to Donald. But the painting, while I was painting this painting, I thought that it's a girl. So I ended up naming this painting Good Morning Dahlia. So here I'm thinking that I'm painting a little female kitten. The room starts to fill out a little bit, and I'm going back and forth between the kitten and the surrounding area, the surroundings. There's a carpet on the floor, so it's not a plain wooden floor at all. There's got to be an interesting exercise, an interesting challenge to paint those shadows. I gotta say, I probably should have vacuumed cleaned the floor, but I haven't. So it's kind of fluffy, but it's not. The carpet is not the same kind of fluffy that the kitten is. The kitten is really fuzzy and really fluffy, and I find it challenging when I was working on this painting. I found it really challenging to convey that. So you see, at this point, I'm still working in big shapes. I'm actually using the brush that I'm using right now, that one, yes, this large brush. That's a watercolor brush. It's not an oil brush at all. It's too soft. But I've added so much Gamsol, you see it kind of starts to leak a little bit. I've added so much Gamsol that kind of makes it fine. You see? I believe it's one of the brushes, one of the watercolor brushes that I brought from Moscow when I moved here. I actually did bring some brushes with me. But, you know, the thing about that is that all of those brushes were watercolor brushes. Perhaps had just one big brush, like multimedia kind of brush. But anyways, so for my intents and purposes right now, it's kind of fine, but I'll be switching over to a harder brush a little later, and just right now I need to cover these large areas and lay it out. The kitten is sitting under a window. So there is a couple of curtains, but we don't see them here, and I'm not going to paint them. There's a couple of curtains that are open. It's morning, and the sun is beaming right into the window. And, you know, as I'm going up there, higher and higher and higher, right? What I'm not painting is the edge of the windowsill. And it's right above the edge of the painting. So you can imagine that, you know, in my reference photo, as far as I remember, oh no, in my reference photo there's no windowsill either. But anyways, so the light is coming from a window. The kitten is sitting under the window, and that bright sunlight falls right on the top of his head. Well, now we know that it's he or her head, and on the fur. It creates this very fuzzy, cozy kind of feel. And it also creates these hard shadows. So you see I've already laid out, I've captured the heaviest shadows right here between the paws and over here. These are the darkest spots on the entire painting. This spot, yeah, here is kind of interesting because the kitten is very light. I mean, the fur, the color is very light. It's really like a peach, kind of warm with orange and with darker kind of tawny brown stripes and white spots. So I'm trying to be very subtle here at some point. I'm really capturing just the heaviest shadows between the paws and that other spot over there. But everything else is not really that dark. It kind of is and it kind of isn't at the same time. So I have to carefully navigate through these values. I guess this was another session, and probably kind of dried out a little bit. Yeah. So I continue working that in and just making sure that the stripes, the darker stripes, that they're of the correct values. Because as I'm moving, you see that area under the chin? It runs down to the belly. That area. I will spend some time working that area because it's turned out to be not an easy one. There's kind of two conflicting things going on at the same time. On one hand, the thing that affects the values here is that as we go from that area right under the chin down to the belly, where there is a dark shadow between the paws, it kind of tends to have a gradient to it because the shadow increases. It gets darker and darker as we go under the belly. But at the same time, this kitten doesn't have dark fur there. Rather, has a white belly, or a very, very light, creamy belly. So it's two conflicting things going on at the same time, and I'm really trying to be realistic here. I don't want to overdo it. I want to kind of keep it loose for the most part. And what I'm mostly focusing here in this painting, I'm trying to capture the light, because that's the light and the kitten and the fuzziness. These are the three most important things to me here in this painting. And see what I'm doing here. I'm just deepening some of those shadows on the head, and I'm starting to add a little bit of that pink red, that glowing pink red on the ears, because that actually tells you visually tells you how bright the light is, because, you know, it's a kitten. So the sunlight obviously will be shining, kind of beaming through the kitten's ears, and will kind of light them up with that really cute pink-red glow. The eyes, that was another interesting thing to work on, because, you know, again, right here, and for now, I'm not really concerning myself with fine detail too much. I'm just laying out the basic color. And this is basically the first time in this painting that I'm using something else, something from the cooler range of colors. I'm using blue here, various shades of blue and green with some grays, and they're actually not warm. They're rather cool. But these eyes, and that's a little thing that I actually thought about when I was getting into this painting. I was thinking, okay, so the colors, the dominant colors of this whole painting, they're all shades of pink and orange, lots of ochre. Lots of ochre and burnt sienna and browns and yellows, lots of yellows, tons of yellows, and some reds. And I was kind of concerned about this because I was thinking, well, okay, so there's all of this going on, but isn't that gonna be kind of boring? You know, it's kind of like a limited palette, really. But then I thought, okay, well, fortunately this kitten had, now the eyes have changed already at this point, a month later. But back then, this kitten's eyes were kind of blue, not like piercing blue, not like cobalt blue, not like sky blue, a kind of blue-greenish. And I made them a little cooler than the kitten's eyes actually were. So I really took out that yellow out of those eyes, and I've allowed them to be cooler, which created this interesting kind of counterpoint to the warmth, the overwhelming warmth of the rest of the painting, which I think makes these eyes stand out. And you will see how it pans out a little later. See how much yellows are there, yellows and grays, and, you know, tons of ochre, and burnt sienna, and some whites to dull out those colors. That's the door frame, yeah, and that's whatever that thing is called. I don't know what's the correct word for it. You know, yeah, this thing is kind of in the bottom of the wall. It runs right in the bottom of the wall. So I'm adding some whites because it's kind of a pale color, and it's, I don't know. And there's tons of reflected light as well, because the light falls on the carpet and it falls on the walls. It kind of bounces off of a lot of surfaces in the room, and then it comes back here, and it's not a new house, and the walls are not really new either. So it's not really this fresh kind of bright yellow. It's rather dulled out, I guess. As you see, I'm working here now. This entire area, this top left quadrant, I am working in this circular motion because I'm trying to emphasize, in a subtle way, I'm trying to emphasize where the light comes from. Trying to point towards, kind of back point towards the source of light, to bring some emphasis. There's a couple of things that emphasize this flow of light. First of all, this circular kind of circular manner that I've painted that the top left quadrant of the painting, right, the background, the wall. So it kind of shows you that the light really comes from there. Another thing is the shadow from the kitten. And now we don't see it, actually. And another thing, of course, are the bright highlights on the kitten's head and the side. You see I'm adding some more golden ochre tones over here I'm also trying to balance it out with some reds, some redder and creamier and pinkier colors where the fur is in the shadow. One thing that I want to note here is that, by the way, you see that I'm kind of getting thicker and thicker here, but not too thick. I'm still mixing my oil paint with a fair amount of Gamsol, because I do understand that I'm gonna, I'm gonna come in on the final stage and I'm gonna throw in some fine details, perhaps, and I still don't know which details am I gonna bring in. Well, most likely I'll be working on the eyes, but there will be areas of the body where I will not really work any fine details, because it's just unnecessary. I'm gonna be really focusing on the eyes and on the face. Everything else has to support that, so there's kind of a hierarchy of importance here. What is important and what is not so important. So the thing about Gamsol is that when I was painting this painting, I didn't have any linseed oil. I just had oil paint and Gamsol, nothing else. So the thing about Gamsol is when you mix in a lot of it into your oil paint, it kind of dulls out the colors when they dry out. If you paint really thin with Gamsol, it tends to dull the colors. So it's kind of a cool thing to know if you're if you're painting thin with just Gamsol and no added linseed oil. Stuff like background areas like this wall, for example, right? It's not supposed to be really bright. It has lots of grays in it here. Now that the exposure is changed on the video, you can see it. There's plenty of grays there, and there's grays in this bottom thing, that lower section of the wall, right, running right into the corner. There's plenty of grays, and I kind of laid in the base colors there. It's not well lit. The only areas that are really well lit is that area, as if like the very top of the painting where the light is coming from, and then these two areas on the kitten, including on the kitten's right ear, well, and the left ear to a certain extent. Everything else, the face of the kitten is kind of mid-shadow, and you see where the darkest area is. And right now, at this stage, it's kind of a little too dark there, and I'll be most likely lightening it up a little bit, brightening it up a little bit. So I'll have to work in some titanium white there, but not purely white, because I don't want it to be too cool. I have to be careful here because the kitten is warm, very warm. The whole scene is very warm. It's warm sunlight, and it's a very warm morning, if not a hot morning actually, in July. So, and it's a very fuzzy kitten. And one of the things that I was trying to do here is the pink on the nose and on the mouth and on the ears. Something that I personally find very adorable about kittens is that this very, very tender pink kind of makes them look even cutesier. It's, I don't know, maybe there's something about pink and innocence, or pink and childishness, or something like this. Well, I mean, it's a little cat baby after all. So I have to keep it tender, and I have to be careful with my choice of colors, and even like the subtleties, like the pink in the ears, right, and the nose. It's not the more intense kind of pink, the reddish pink that a mature cat has. Like the father of this kitten, for example, Dean, right? Damn it, he's a bulky, large dude nowadays. He doesn't have that tender pink on his nose. He doesn't have that tender pink in his ears anymore. It's kind of pink, but it's more intense. There's more red in it. But the kitten has this very light kind of pink. And because of the light, as you know, you will see it a little later on both ears, I will add some more intense red, but that is only because of the light, and it will just emphasize the intensity of the light source. So here we are. This is like, I don't know, session 3 probably. I was painting mostly at night. I don't remember if I was doing any sessions at daytime with this particular painting. It just turned out that way. I was kind of trying to change my schedule a little bit, and I was doing a whole bunch of other things. So, and I kind of flipped it over and, you know, started painting more at daytime. Now I'm getting to the fine details, the finer details, you know, not the fine details, but, you know, the finer details on the face, and starting to give a little bit more underlying anatomy, which is important because, you know, I kind of don't want to overdo it here. I don't want to overwork it. It's a very, very soft kitten. Very, very soft kitten, but, you know, even a very, very soft kitten still has bones and an underlying anatomy, so I have to indicate this. That shadow under the chin, I don't want to go too dark with that one. I'm kind of underlaying that shadow, a shadowed area, but then I will lighten it up a little bit. I'll brighten it up. Now, that thing over there, right? Where I'm painting right now. Yep. I'm defining, finally, I'm defining an edge around the kitten. And I will have to be careful here because I don't want to make a hard edge, a sharp edge between the background and the kitten all the way around. Like, for example, you see where there is the kitten's back, right? There is no hard edge. But there's going to be a occasionally harder edge around the head, but not everywhere. Why is it important? It is important because edges, they are, how do I put this? Edges really tell you where the focal point is. So the focal point of the painting is going to be the head of the kitten. That's the eyes, that number one thing is going to jump at you, you know, when you look at the finished painting, right? That's what I intend here. So I'm deliberately doing away with the edge along the back. It's kind of in a shadow anyways, but now where do we have the soft edge? Along the back, and then on the opposite side where there's the kitten's left paw, right? It's in a shadow. So I'm not doing a hard edge there. And all the way down to that paw, that whole left paw of the kitten is in a shadow. There's a very dark spot between the kitten's paws, then there are really dark but fine spots under the paws, just because, you know, because of where the sunlight comes from. And then there is this extended shadow that runs to the bottom right corner of the painting, and it's kind of, well, it's dark, but I'm again laying down the base color of it, the foundation, then I'll brighten it up a little bit. This circular area around which I'm painting right now, it's kind of in mid shadow. It's not really bright, it's in mid shadow. Now here we go with the edges and all this. See that right ear? The ears are going to be mostly with a hard edge, but then that hard edge is going to subside and going to become kind of blurry, and then it's going to become a soft edge. as we're moving down into the shadow. Switching over to a thinner brush. Again, this is not a watercolor, this is not a multimedia brush, it's not an oil brush at all. It doesn't hold a lot of paint. It's quite an interesting exercise to use brushes like this, but there is something about it that I actually like. In a way, it's like a, what do you call it? Containing factor. I can't pick up a lot of paint on a brush like this, so it keeps me from overusing, from putting too much paint on the canvas right now. I'm painting really in very sparse amounts of paint right now, but at this point, the amount of Gamsol mixed into the oil paint substantially decreased, so all it is right now is just mostly just paint out of the tube. And it's getting really thick. Well, quite frankly, there's not much that I'm gonna do about the eyes other than just hone in the fine details and actually add that little kittenish glimmer. Yep. A little bit of that. But at the same time, I don't want to overdo this whole area. It still has to be loose and painterly. And that's actually a very important thing that I'm keeping in mind every time that I paint in oil. I'm not interested in doing a photographic copy of a photography or of reality. I'm not really interested in doing a photographic copy of that. I'm interested in capturing the essence of the subject. The light, the shape, the feel. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So I don't want to overdo it, and I'm kind of edging. Sounds like a pun. An unintended pun, apparently. I'm kind of edging on doing just enough and giving just enough detail. See what I'm doing to the eyes. And then I move on. The nose. That's really important to define the nose. Because the kitten. I mean, when you look at those eyes, you look at this face. Now, what stands out to you in a kitten's face? What makes it recognizable, really recognizable? That facial expression on a kitten's face. Well, it's the eyes, and the way the kitten looks at you. It's a tilt of the head, the eyes, the nose, the mouth. There you go. So now you see that the highlights on the eyes, they are rather coming from below, and that is because those highlights come from reflected light. They don't come from the source of light from the top, right? They come from the bottom. And that's one of the reasons why I picked specifically this photo reference to paint from, because I just found this photo to be interesting in terms of all the bouncing light, how that sunlight kind of just transforms within the context of the room. And, you know, needless to say that the kitten was, of course, totally adorable. He was just sitting there and looking at me one morning, and I just, oh, there we go. Here, you see what I'm doing? So there used to be a hard edge, but the kitten is really small, maybe 3 months old. So the kitten was really fuzzy, really, really, really fuzzy, like fluff. And I had to convey this So here we go, we pick up a bristle brush, and that's a cheap bristle brush. That's, you know, nothing special really. And I'm just adding some of this fuzz, some of this lighter fuzz, illuminated by the bright sunlight. Yep, there you go. On the ears, of course. Very fuzzy kitten. At this point, as you can see, I switched over to painting in the garage because of daylight. And here with different lighting, now you can see a little bit more what's going on with the background, what's going on with in terms of details and how much detail vs little detail, where the details actually are all concentrated. It's all the area, the higher detailed area is the face. And the body, or to a lesser extent. The left paw of the kitten actually is less detailed than the right paw. And that is, like I said before, because the left paw is in a shadow. You still see, though, how that paw gets out of the shadow. So it's not just that it, you know, there's a very soft edge there. It's not that there's a hard edge between, you know, the darkest dark, right? Between the paws and the left elbow. It's very subtle. We're still not done here, so see, I'm adding some fine detail and some white at this point. I'm painting thin to thick, dark to light. And it, you know, it just turned out that, yeah, here you can see I'm adding some. This is not purely white at this point, it's a little bit of cadmium. A little bit of cadmium and white, and titanium white. Yep. Again, the watercolor brush. Again, some more Gamsol. So I'm doing something. I was painting thicker in these areas before, in previous sessions, but right now I'm picking up this watercolor brush. I'm really mixing in a ton of Gamsol, a lot of it, because I want rather a very thin coat, a very thin layer of paint. I want to just tone these areas, and I do want them to get a little duller, because now I'm thinking, okay, so I have the face and I have the ears and I have this, that is the focal point of the painting, right? Now I'm looking at everything else and I'm like, okay, to make them stand out even more so, what do I need to do? I need to dull out the other areas, and I need to make sure that the shading in those areas, that the depth of the room, that corner, is spot on. Because if it's not, then yeah, there you can see it. Changed exposure, the lighting probably changed. It was an overcast day, right? So now you see that in context, the more I add depth to the room and to the carpet and texture, and the more kind of painterly and loose it is, you know, that's what I'm deliberately doing right now, right? The more does the kitten stand out. But not all the kitten. The kitten still is not disconnected from the context of the room. You see, the kitten is in the room, and that's very important. You see the soft edge on the back, right? And the left paw, soft edges. Here, I'm working on details right now with a really thin brush. And I've added some thin, you know, really fine details, like the whiskers, for example, right? And those other little whiskers over there, and then the ears, and they're like, and the eyes, and the nose, and all of that. That's all fine detail, but this, I'm just adding, like, broad strokes. Just adding texture. At this point, I'm just signing the painting. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think I'll be doing something like this again. Probably with the next painting. I don't know. Leave me a comment. Tell me if you enjoyed this kind of format, because doing this at the same time, I kind of don't really like it to paint and talk at the same time. I don't know, it kind of sucks, I think. I like to, I like to paint and just, do whatever I want, Maybe I like to just stand there and gaze at the painting and, find weak spots and then just, lay down a couple of brush strokes and then stand back and then go full in and paint like a savage for the following half an hour. But, the point is that I don't always even want to film what I'm painting. Sometimes there's just a shitload of revisions, and sometimes it just breaks my concentration. I sometimes just want to dive in. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to talk about anything. I don't want anybody around at all. I just want to focus on what I'm doing, and I want to make a deep dive. So, I don't know. Tell me, how do you like this format? If that's entertaining, if that's something that you want to see. Sometimes I'll be making just kind of time lapses of painting without any commentary with some music. And sometimes I just think, I don't know, this is just me basically explaining what am I doing and, how do I work on things. And I think it might be interesting, at least to some people. Again, I'm not claiming that, I'm not trying to teach anybody here. I'm not really a teacher. I mean, as far as oil paint and all that. But, someone might find it helpful, I think. So tell me what you think. This painting is called Good Morning Dahlia. I think I will leave that name because I actually thought that I was painting a girl. And I think the kitten actually looks like a girl, specifically in this painting. It's kind of funny nowadays because as I'm recording this episode, I have the guy himself, Donald, who was the model for this painting. He grew up since then. Kittens grow fast. He grew up since then. He's sitting right here on the table and watching me in the eye. And I'm petting him at the same time. And now he definitely looks like a dude, that I can tell you. So, thank you very much for being with me this episode. And you will see me and hear me next time. Ciao.